being here. All right. The agenda has been emailed out. There are some hard copies up here if anybody needs one. Welcome. We will go ahead and start with a review of last meeting's minutes from January. They were included in the email for today. We would start off with anybody wanting to make a motion to accept those minutes.
This is Josette. I'm moving that we accept.
Dr. Toysher moves. Second?
Second.
Dr. Borton, thank you. All right, we'll accept those. Okay, so welcome. The correspondence log is attached. We'll talk about those in the various program agency reports. And before we dive into the first main agenda item, if we could just get a quick, minimally chaotic roll call on the phone for record keeping.
Cosgrove.
I heard Cosgrove. We've heard Toysher, Kenyon, and Borton so far.
Kiori Tanaka.
Dr. Doran, Nathanelli, Innes, and Shaw.
Dr. Mangione.
Trepaz.
Mangione and Trepaz.
Brunhast.
Todd Wright.
There's a fax machine on.
Donna Kamen, Alicia Broadbent, Southwestern.
Thank you.
Ian Impel, Chautauqua County.
Beth Moses. Mickey Farner, OEM.
Bobby Kuhn, Cattaraugus County.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll get started. First item is the CMAC SEMSCO report. Dr. Walters, anything?
1 second, I'm just pulling up the notes real quick.
Take your time, sir.
There were a few things that came up at the meeting that I'll just kind of hit the highlights to discuss. In the medical standards, there was discussion about the BLS collaborative protocols for the state, which are actually slightly different than the BLS protocols for the state were slightly different than the collaborative protocols. I don't know if that was supposed to be the intent, but there were some differences. The motion was made and decision to make the collaborative protocols the BLS protocols for New York State. There were some other discussions on some policies for protocol changes and a timeline. A policy was approved that kind of puts together a timeline for how we will address protocol changes every year, when new protocol changes will be discussed at the state level for discussion, when they'll be voted upon, and then timeline for implementation to kind of standardize and hardwire that going forward. So that was approved and is out there. And there was also a advisory on medical devices that has come out that basically about other, the CMAC and SEMSCO do not approve specific medical devices for use on ambulances. If it's something that is FDA approved, then you are able to use it, but the policy kind of formalized how you would do that, making sure that you have medical director approval, appropriate training and credentialing of providers in your agency before just putting something on without a medical director's awareness. So that policy was put out there as well. There was some discussion, I think people are aware that there is a BLS iGel pilot program that is underway, and there's a policy statement online on the Bureau website regarding that. And again, I'm just trying to hit a couple of highlights here. I'll let Mickey talk about some training and education updates in a second if there's any. The other big thing, there are a couple of things that I'll just mention. The Bureau's been working on some quality metrics that agencies will be able to run. Every agency will be able to go into some data pulled from electronic PCRs, click a button, and then get some quality metrics on their agency and how they benchmark, I believe, compared to like New York State. A lot of these will be based off some of the NEMSIS criteria, things that come out of the the NEMSIS criteria and the NEMSQA, National Quality Indicators for EMS. I think that will be useful for agencies. There should also then be ways for regions or counties to look at this in a more global, larger perspective. So it gives us some opportunities to look at some kind of aggregate QA, QI information, and maybe something that we look at from a WREMAC QA committee down the road once this is available. I believe the timeline for this is supposed to be available to agencies to begin in May, but that might get pushed back a little bit from what I hear. I don't know if Ed has any more information on that.
Dr. Walters, you're probably accurate with that statement.
Okay. All right. So we'll see, but that's the tentative timeline for that. I think that will be useful when it comes out. There was also some discussion, and I know it's been discussed in some REMSCO meetings and other venues, and emails circulated regarding Part S proposed budget changes from the governor's budget. There are some things in there. There's a section specifically in there, obviously Part S on EMS, and some things that I think are a lot of things that people have talked about wanting, and things that, things we wanted to see in EMS for a while that are beneficial. There were a couple of things that seem to have drawn some, conversation, I'll say. One of them is regarding the CON process and about those not going through the REMSCOs but going directly to the SEMSCO. So that was a discussion point, and the other discussion point in there seemed to be about EMS districts and what their role would be, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot. There were a lot of questions about what those EMS districts would do, how they would operate, who they would report to, and things that's not fully delineated in the proposed budgetary changes, and so that was something that seemed to have some angst from the group. I know different organizations or different groups have written letters and things about that. And there was some discussion both at CMAC and SEMSCO regarding those, and I don't want to rehash any of those discussions here, but I would just suggest that everybody go and read those things. There are some good things in there. I will say that my personal opinion is that it is I don't know how I feel on all the changes in Part S, but I do think the fact that 2 years in a row the governor has included EMS in the budget proposals and really recognizing the role that EMS has to public health and public safety in the state, I think it's nice to see that incorporation in the budget and is encouraging. So with that, I think that's really the highlights that I have. Mickey, I know you're on the line. If you have anything from training and ed that you want to specifically bring forward to the group.
No, they're looking at several different things, and it's all ongoing, nothing definitive. Thank you.
I think that's it then, Dr. O'Brien.
Very good, sir. Thank you. We'll move on to the chairman report. Really, I don't have much to address today. We're going to talk about the bylaws under old business, but the bylaws review revisions that incorporated Dr. Bart's working group's suggestions for our update, because we have to update these every 2 years, and we haven't done it in probably 10 years. There is one addition and one change that I'm going to tell you about now, so that way we can talk about the rest of the substance in the old business. But on the second page, under Section 2, on Article 4, Section 2, there's just some updates that says service medical director criteria were listed in DOH 9501. The updated policy is 1105. So that would be updated, and then a proposed addition under officers. One of the qualifications for the chair and vice chair positions to include either emergency medicine or EMS board certification. There are a couple pathways to EMS board certification that would allow other specialties in, but it seems like that would be a reasonable background for the WREMAC chair, but we can talk about that when we come back. No other changes were sent to me beforehand or suggestions, but we'll certainly have an opportunity for discussion when we get there. So that brings us to Trauma Advisory Committee. Beth.
Hello, I have no report. Our STAC meeting was canceled 2 months in a row. The RTAC meeting is next week, and people should have gotten an invite.
Thank you. Program agency reports. STEMS.
Hello, I just have a few things to report. I know Dr. Walters mentioned the iGel. We do have 2 agencies so far from our region who have been approved to start participating in that, so we're excited that we have some participation down here. We did host a leadership course that lasted for 3 weeks. We did have great participation in that. Some people on the call here today were able to attend. We did it in a virtual format, and that was very well received. So we're looking forward to hopefully doing another one of those. We did recently get signed on to use the state's, under the state's contract with Collaboration to start using their LMS. So STIX now has our own site on that, and so we're excited to be using that. And then lastly, last night we held a simulation night. So I just wanted to thank Oshai Children's Hospital and Catholic Health for coming down to Olean and doing that simulation night. And we're looking forward to hopefully having you guys back for later on this year. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. UBMD, Rob and Mike.
Hello, everyone. As far as UBMD is concerned, we put our
Could they come up to the phone? We can't hear him.
Yes.
I should have Karen do it. As far as UBMD is concerned, our report was sent out. A couple things we're working on. Our website's going to be revamped, so there's going to be some change in information on there. We're going to be adding a few things. Social media, we've gotten some feedback on our Facebook page, our old UBMD Facebook page we don't have access to. We've been trying to work with Facebook to get access to that, but still have not had any success. So we are operating under the banner of the Lake Plains Community Care Network name. But when you put that in on Facebook, it pops up all UBMD. We've been working on BLSFR agencies and recertifications, more importantly the ones enrolled in the CME programs, to make sure that they are taken care of. We want to remind everybody about the protocol app on Muru. We've had a few people ask about the older app. Muru is what's approved by the state, and it's been recently updated as well. It contains regional policies and stuff like that. EMSC is still encouraging agencies to identify a point of contact, and also there's a survey that's been put out that they're still waiting on different agencies to fill out that survey, and we're supposed to be in contact with them very shortly to figure out how we can help them. Our program agency recently purchased an iSimulate for training purposes. It has the capacity to run through patient scenarios with real-time feedback. I know we've loaded the ACLS algorithms in there for testing and learning purposes. It simulates cardiac heart monitors, AEDs, and ventilators, and we're going to offer that up in our regions for training. So if anybody's interested in that, agency leadership, medical directors can get a hold of us. We can take care of that. We've begun onboarding Big Lakes into the UBMD credentialing portal, and they are actually doing a phenomenal job since we've only started that about 3 weeks ago, and we've got about 90% participation so far, and we're still reaching out to get that up and going. So, but we do have that in the realm. We've also reestablished our AHA training site status, so we'll be able to do, of course, the BLS courses, HeartSaver, PALS, ACLS, and we are now credentialed for the Advanced Stroke Life Support, which is a new program in conjunction with the Gordon Center. As the other program agencies did as well, we did roll out protocol changes, and we've encouraged the agencies to follow up with their providers, make sure they know about that. And recruitment retention, we've launched a new website, recruitemswny.com, and this website is, the sole purpose is collaboration on recruitment and retention in the region. So it's up and running right now. However, it's got very limited information. A little background on it: if somebody goes on there, wants to become an EMS provider, doesn't know the pathway to get there, they can fill out forms, comes to our office, and we can help them get to that pathway they need to go, whether it's career, whether it's volunteer. And that's the end of our report.
Thank you. everybody. Subcommittees, any of the collaboratives?
The only thing that I'll mention is there is a mechanism if anybody has suggestions for protocol changes, new protocols or things or issues in that, there is a way that those can be submitted and to the collaborative group. We are having a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night to discuss some suggested revisions and things like that. And if there's anything that comes out of that that's substantial, I will bring them back at the next meeting here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Doctors Tanaka or Borton, anything for QI?
Nothing new to report.
Thank you. We have 2 ad hoc committees to report now. So the ad hoc committee on medical direction, Dr. Walters.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, we discussed some, I guess I'll say changes, because we didn't really have a policy before. So drafting a new policy for requirements for online medical control, and this came up after some discussions from one of the hospitals in the southern tier looking to be interested in giving medical direction as a base station. And they have a lot of providers coming from who are, board certified ER docs and people coming from Pennsylvania that hold Pennsylvania state medical control certifications already, and about how we address those things without making it overly burdensome to them and set some standards as a REMAC can do under Article 30, set the standard for what is required for a physician or a provider to give medical control. So the draft policy was sent out, and there's a couple of things. We discussed it at the last meeting, and there was some consensus on requirements. So I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights real quick, and then we can have some, there's a couple of questions that I have for the group, and then we can have some discussion on it. So first off, the standards or the requirements for a provider to give medical direction. It was felt at the last meeting that if you are a board certified physician in emergency medicine or pediatric emergency medicine EMS, that we wouldn't require any additional base station course or training, since that is in the core curriculum of all those residency and fellowship programs at this time. If it is, however, a physician who is not board certified in one of those specialties, or it is a advanced practice provider, a PA or an NP, then we would require them to take a base station course prior to being authorized to give medical direction. So that's kind of outlined in the policy there. There's a lot of other discussion, and some of the wording is phrased from other policies from other REMACs that we modeled this off of, as well as some of the actual wording in state regulations, which I'll come to in a second. But those are kind of the essential requirements. There is a line in there also about physicians in training to cover residents in that for giving medical direction. And the other item that I just wanted to talk about is we discussed last time whether or not we should require, I'm sorry, let me back up. The other thing in there is that if you hold a certification from another state, right, most states have the similar scopes of practice, although slight different protocols, but not much different these days in EMS. So if there was someone, say from Pennsylvania, who had an out-of-state medical control certification, that we would also consider that as equivalent to a base station course and not require them to do anything additional. One of the discussions I believe Dr. Teuscher brought up at the last meeting was, do we require new providers to somehow sign that they've read our protocols, or attest that they are familiar with the scopes of practice, or something to that regard? And that's something that I did not put in this draft policy, but we can consider. I guess I wanted to bring it up for discussion here. My only question or concern is that, and we talked a little bit last time, is that while we have the statutory authority to delineate what's required for a physician to give medical control, we really don't have any way to police this, or to take a physician, to tell a hospital a physician can't do this, or we don't really have any teeth to enforce that. And to be quite honest, I don't know, with some of the turnover, some of the high locums use in different areas and that, I don't know how we enforce or police this and that. And so I don't know if it's something that we want to go down that road. It could be as simple as requiring them to sign and attest that they did it, but then someone has to collect and or, I guess, maintain a database of these, and
He
then
says
are we?
while looking towards Karen.
Which I do.
But I don't know, right, but are we going to do that for every physician? I'm sure that we don't do that for every physician working in the western region right now who's giving medical control. I don't know that we would get compliance from all the facilities to do that, and so I guess the question is, while I think that would be great in an ideal world, do we want to go down that rabbit hole and do that, or do we say, this is the standard? Every Article 28 ED has a representative or a voting membership here. This is the policy. It's up to you to make sure you are in compliance with it and put that on the hospitals. And I will leave that, I'll stop for discussion from the group, I guess.
Yeah, you know, I think, I agree. This is one of those things where we have a responsibility but very little enforcement capability, right? The only distinct authority given to me is to suspend a physician or a hospital's ability to give medical direction, which is not a discussion I really want to have with anybody, particularly at the facility level, right? I don't want to send out an advisory saying don't call XYZ hospital for medical direction anymore, because even if I did that and places keep doing it, what are we going to do about it? So I think that kind of is a quagmire that would be best sidestepped. So I agree with you there. I sort of, you know, I guess my feeling is similar to yours, Dr. Walters, that, you know, we set the standard and we say this is the policy, this is the regional policy we've agreed on. It's up to the hospitals and other, you know, whether a full hospital or an Article 28 standalone ED, that, you know, this is the policy, you are aware of it. If something happens and somebody were to come to us and say, is this person authorized to give medical direction, all we would be able to say is, we don't have a record of that person meeting the policy, which really doesn't have anything to do with us. So, yeah, I mean, I think you and I are on the same page. Other thoughts? Dr. Clemency?
This is Odette again. Just back along that thought, I think that I agree that we shouldn't be the ones maintaining the record, but if, as part of our MOU with the hospitals, are that they will make sure that, and just so it's stated so that the buck is passed, that they're attesting that they will be making sure their physicians are all familiar with it who are giving med control.
And,
I mean, I think someone should have responsibility for it. And part of the thing is that if you have it stated somewhere, there'll be maybe a little bit more attention to making sure it's done. Nothing is going to be 100%,
right, most
certainly. But if it's stated somewhere and someone's signing it, at least there's going to be some effort by someone.
Right, I agree with that. Dr. Clemency, you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with Josette, because I always agree with Josette. I think
wise.
It's for my own safety. So I think though, so I agree with everything you guys said so far. The only thing that was disappointed in this draft is, I think the language about recording the med control tape and sharing it with agencies in the REMAC for quality improvement, I think that needs to be like shall, not a recommendation.
Okay.
I think we in many ways are showing a lot of flexibility towards hospitals and trying to be collaborative and kind of meet with them where they are. But on a macro level, I think a reasonable expectation is that the hospitals share those tapes with the agencies who are on the other side of that call and with us. And I think that's been highly inconsistent. And I think now is the time to make that consistent.
So so instead of saying it's highly recommended that they record these calls, make that must.
In order to participate in providing base station, and while I agree with Mike's statement that, like, you know, on a Thursday, if you had a doc that didn't meet criteria, we're not gonna, you know, shut down your hospital's ability to provide medical direction. That's an individual thing. On a macro level, or you know, an overall piece is, do you have the ability to do this? Are you playing in the sandbox with others? I think that is something that should be an expectation, and I think that is something we should hold a firmer line on.
Hey, Brian, it's Dr. Werner. So, Brian, the hard part is some of the rural hospitals don't even have a mechanism by which to record medical direction calls. They still are doing paper notes.
Then, I mean, I think I think the position that REMAC needs to be then that you have to take steps towards getting that. If you want to be a base station hospital, I mean, not to cast aside the limitations that rural hospitals and other facilities face. I mean, it's 2023, and I think we need to take steps in the right direction to preserve these records, and it's for provider safety, it's for facility defense, it's for quality improvement. So I agree with Dr. Clemency. I think this needs to be a requirement.
And I would certainly be comfortable with creating like an entry ramp for that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So saying that this is
Well,
the
yeah,
policy.
and there's gonna be, I know we're waiting on digital
Yeah.
recording right
This
now
is-
for the grants pending in the wonderful
Yeah.
branch of New York State to try to get everything into there. So there's gonna have to be some sort of grace period, time frame, et cetera, et cetera.
This policy
And,
takes
especially in a time when everybody's, crunching numbers as it is, to just come across with a blanket one is gonna be sort of tough while we're waiting on grants from New York State, everything else like that. I mean, sometimes it gets lost as to what, we've gone over this in the past, it's like ECMC getting medical direction saying, hey, you should go to the nearest facility, which most of the times is the right thing, but sometimes given the different levels of care that are being be provided without everybody knowing what those levels of care are, sometimes it actually results in a further delay of care. So I think that keeping it more on the local level as much as possible is definitely helpful to get patients to the care that they need. But we're going to just have to find a nice way to give some time for the hospitals to be able to get some of these. I mean, we've been on paper charts up until 4 years ago. So it's quite a lag compared to what you guys are dealing with in the city.
I think 6 months is a very reasonable transition period.
Hey, this is Ed Cosgrove. Question. I'm sorry if I missed it earlier. I apologize. Where is the impetus coming to record these conversations? Is this from the state, or is this something that the WREMAC is thinking is best practice?
It is not coming to us from the state. This was generated by the WREMAC.
Okay, so my next question is how are we currently addressing quality issues in med direction? Because we can ask everyone to record these conversations just in the same way. I'm old enough to remember doing everything on paper, like taking notes and writing down the information from every call coming in. And I got to be candid with you. At a certain point, I stopped doing that because they never went anywhere. They got thrown in a circular file. So if we collect the data, who's going to be responsible for? Do we currently, right now, have a process in place that allows for aggressive, sort of performance improvement, quality assurance review of the conversations that occur every day all across Western New York? How do we go about doing that? Are we going to get in the business of doing that, or are we just creating another thing for the hospitals to do, which will end up in a digital circular file until we need it, and then we won't be sure how to get it? And I'm just being skeptical, but the hospitals have no money. I don't think anybody's going to be enthusiastic at Bertram Chafee about buying a digital recording system for these phone calls. So are we asking for something that will never happen? And even if we got the information, how are we going to manage it? And what are we going to do with it?
I would say, so ECMC currently does this, so does Kaleida Health, and both systems internally QA their tapes, and both systems participate in the quality improvement process, reviewing their tapes upon request.
The WREMAC QI subcommittee has participated in some reviews and has gotten cooperation from a number of outside hospitals.
How often does that happen?
That we request it?
No, that we have cases that could rise to the level of the WREMAC and we review it.
Delightfully, only a few times a year.
On the agency level,
Right.
a couple times a year.
And we've also had a few times that we've had some questions as to the medical direction from down here. And we've been able to work with the medical director, the providers, get everybody together, figure it out, and there's never had to be a recording that was present.
Yeah, I mean,
I really got to come from the spot of saying that this seems like the places who are graced with a whole lot more resources than the rural outlying facilities have are trying to sort of put their system into the outlying facilities, and I just think it's a lot of extra impetus put on the hospital and the providers without a whole lot of measurable. If this was something that happened twice a week, I completely get it. But if we got
I agree with Daryl.
I don't think QI is the only reason to do this. I think there are I think there are benefits to the agencies as well as the hospitals providing the direction should there be any kind of medical legal dispute or patient complaint or whatnot, and what was actually discussed with the physician or the APP giving direction, what the information relayed to the hospital from the crew was, that side of things is something I find myself participating in with the agencies I work with a number of times a month. It's still not 2 times a week. I think this is a nationally accepted best practice, and the other reality is, not every facility needs to give medical direction. If this isn't something that a facility is able to, with a grace period, commit to doing, there are hospitals, I work at one of them, but there are many hospitals that are happy to give medical direction to anybody that calls. So if that's not a burden or a weight that a facility wants to or is able to lift, there are other options for their crews to get support. I would prefer, and I believe Dr. Wenner would agree with me, I would prefer to keep it, like you said, at the local level as much as possible, and have the receiving facility have input on the care and the direction that's being given. But if this is a roadblock to that, I would understand.
I would just say until it's a national, actual written best practice versus a general, gestalt where we feel like it's the best practice, I'm going to have to go ahead and say that I say leave it as strongly recommended, which is as originally written, and that's going to be my standpoint for this.
If I can find evidence that it's a nationally accepted best practice, would you support my motion?
Well, I don't really have a choice then, I'm always going to stick with the current standard of care, I would say, versus best practice. There's a lot of things there, best practice.
I'll read the textbook tonight.
If we have it that standard of care, Brian, I don't have much of a choice, and I'm not trying to give you guys a hard time.
No, I understand.
It's just, it's a different. As a lot of you guys know, it's a completely different thing. It really is. So I'm just trying to keep things. Medical direction has gone fairly well down here. It's gone fairly smooth for quite some time without having recordings. We've been able to deal with all of the but once again, I'm living in my little 3-foot world here. So we haven't had any problems that we haven't been able to resolve from medical direction standpoints. I don't know if there's a lot of other issues with other places, but down here we've been able to deal with the issues that have arisen so far. Not saying that it wouldn't be nice to have a recording here and there. And like I said, we're actually moving towards having a recording. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate from, I don't know that we should have a written policy without a meaningful means of going through and pulling random tapes just to do QI and everything else like that as a reason to have it, to say that this is something that we are saying you have to have, period, end of story, versus strongly recommend.
I would agree with Daryl completely. I think, for those of you that don't know, I'm actually an attorney too. I don't know, I think sometimes we do things out of concern, unnecessary concern from a medical legal perspective to, quote, cover our asses. I think if, we have a very robust, across Western New York, I think a very robust communication system between the hospital setting and the pre-hospital world. I think that if we are proactive in managing these issues with good communication as they occur, I think we're going to avoid any major problems. And unless, certainly I would agree, if this is something that's the national standard, that's one thing. But I think we're anticipating legal problems which don't often occur. They could, and I think we're better off making sure that we educate people and we have the proper standards of education and performance in the field so that everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing. We should have a policy that mandates, base station course and some modicum of knowledge of what you're doing if you're going to give medical direction, for sure. But I think mandating, to record these things, which will, I think, end up being recorded and never used, doesn't make a lot of sense unless Brian or someone comes up with a national policy from ASAP or something that is currently mandated in the majority of states across the country or whatever it is. I think it's going to change. It's going to add one more layer of thing to do that's not going to really add much to what we're doing. That's my 2 cents, and I'll shut up now.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I would propose we table this until the next meeting of the REMAC when we have an opportunity to discuss any findings on whether this is a national standard and to adopt this, Dr. Clemency's proposed amendment.
So I will, just as food for thought, in that time for discussion, one of the other questions, Beth, I saw your email about some suggestions in that, which I'll get to in a minute. If we do go down the road of maintaining recordings, do we need to think about a time frame for how long they're saved? That was a question that came up as well. So not that we need to decide that now, but just something that I will, kind of throw out there. And I guess I just want to back up to, maybe Brian or Josette, to your questions about, do we want to put something in here? Are we going to make this something where a physician has to fill something out and sign it off, or the hospital does, or we decided we didn't want to do that? I'm not sure which way we were standing there.
I was not suggesting any additional language besides that one section.
But as far as, attesting that they've read the protocols or something, is that something that we wanted to do, or we want the hospitals to do, or the individual provider, or what was the feeling there?
My recommendation was that the hospitals police that as they see fit.
I think we make sure the hospitals are aware of the policy, and we say that, by answering the phone, that person is attesting to the fact that they actually meet these requirements. So one of the numbers in here, and I didn't want to read the whole policy in the meeting, but one of the things, and maybe this will alleviate some of those concerns, it says designate a hospital medical control. These are requirements of the base station or of the facility. It says designate a hospital medical control director to be in charge of overall coordination of medical control in that facility and assure facility and individual provider compliance with this policy. Is that?
There you go.
Yeah.
We're good with that?
Yeah. But I just want to for the tape, because I'm being recorded, I just want to say that it is my proposal to let the hospitals do that, because I would like to remove some burden from them and let them put that energy towards recording tapes and doing other things. I don't think that's the best practice, but that is, I think, part of the overall compromise which I'm proposing.
Gotcha. Just a couple other things then regarding this that I'll bring up. Beth, I did see Beth Moses had some suggestions, mostly correcting my typos, which I appreciate, so thank you, and grammar. The other thing, Beth, there was a question in there when it talks about requirements of someone who's not board certified. In those requirements, it says must be a licensed physician or APP, and then says is certified in basic and advanced life support, advanced trauma life support, or equivalent, and then meets one of the following below. And Beth had raised the question on what is equivalent to ATLS, and that wording is taken right out of the hospital, the 405 regulations is where that came from. It is not defined as to what is equivalent. That is up to hospitals to decide, but there are other courses like ITLS has a provider or physician geared course, or a lot of hospitals that are not trauma centers will accept board certification as being equivalent. So my recommendation is that we don't go down that road of defining equivalence, since it's not defined in the state regulation, and just leave it where it is. But that's where that wording came from. So any thoughts on that?
Doc, what about PALS if you're dealing with a pediatric patient?
Yeah, so I think that that's a good idea. Again, this specific language, PALS, does not show up in the state regulation, and so that's not a requirement of a provider working in an emergency room under the state law, and so that's why we didn't put it in there, because this mirrors that. A lot of hospitals, or most hospitals, probably do require it, and I'm not opposed to putting it in there, but that's why it was that way.
I thought PALS was required by New York State.
Yes.
To work in providers. Yeah, but I think it's intuitive that if you're saying medical control, have PALS because it's required to have PALS.
So
I will. You got to say it, like, explicitly in draft, but I thought it was a state law that you had to have PALS.
I will double check, and we'll bring that back up in the next meeting. How's that?
Yep. Because we don't get that.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
And I think, Dr. O'Brien, I think that those are the only things. My only other point was that then, once we agree on this, there may be a couple other policies that we just want to update, just so that the wording matches and is consistent. And the one question that I'll bring up is our REMAC policy. This is an old one. 1998-5.
I'm coming back to that, sir.
What's that?
I'm gonna come back to that.
Okay.
I promise you.
Never mind.
Yes, sir.
Move on.
All right,
Oh,
so.
wait, Mike.
Sorry, I mean.
Oh, yeah, sorry, please.
Under provider requirements, item 3, where it says physicians in training, I would suggest changing that to in residency, because I know your system has fellows that, and that bullet point may not be applicable to.
Can't hear who's speaking.
Sorry, it was Aaron Farney.
Good point.
So I would just change the word physicians in training to physicians in residency.
Okay.
Fair. All right, so unless I hear an objection, we will table the rest of this approval until next meeting, when we can hear an update on recordings and any other changes that may be submitted based on today's discussion. Okay, moving forward. The Ad Hoc Interfacility Transport Protocol Committee. I heard Todd on the phone.
Yep, Todd's on. So we were able to form a work group. We met March 7th and established 4 primary goals of this review. Number 1, we want to review the existing formulary for update and general review. Number 2, look at developing some SET-specific protocols to embed within our interfacility program. Look at interfacility transport medical control, and finally, formatting of our interfacility transport protocols. So, we've decided to attack the SCT-specific protocols first. We've assigned 10 different specialty care transport protocols to review. We're using the MILREMS document as kind of a roadmap, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we plan to meet again the last week of March, the week of March 27th, and that date has not been settled upon yet. The one point that I do want to encourage is physician involvement in this work group. So if you are interested in participating, please reach out to Alicia. She is the central email point for participation, and we can get you a doodle schedule sent out to you. So that's the end of my report at this point. Any questions?
It doesn't seem so, Todd, but I'm gonna go ahead and say thank you very much for getting further along than any of the prior iterations of the IFT committee that we've tried to set up. So, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing more. All right, cool. So that brings us to old business, which is the bylaws review. Today's just a big item day. The bylaws were sent out for today. There were no major changes proposed to the name of the organization or its purpose. There's a few typos that I'm seeing in here that we will correct just to not have typos. Scrolling through, let's see, the main changes were really to membership. So if we go straight to Article 4, because there were no changes in the earlier stuff. Voting members, so one emergency medicine physician from each acute care Article 28 hospital in the regions, appointed by the ED director via written notification to the WREMAC. And then the addition is EMS medical directors who are approved by the WREMAC serving an agency within the region. So this will greatly expand the voting membership of the WREMAC to include anybody who is an EMS medical director who is approved by us. Excuse me. The proposed amendment that I heard to Article 4, Section 2, no, correct, we'll come back to that, it's under officer, sorry. So you have to be licensed to practice medicine in New York State, meet the criteria outlined in DOH policy, as well as the current WREMAC policy. The term for 3 years, most people are just automatically reappointed. We don't require written notification of reappointment. No changes there in the rest of Article 4. The officers are still the chair and the vice chair.
Dr. Brian?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Mickey Furness.
Hi, Mickey.
I have the old bylaws in my hand, and it seems to be there's a couple of people removed from membership.
Oh, tell me.
And that includes my fellows and a regional council member. Was that intentional, or was that just an overlook?
Not by me. The EMS fellows are certainly voting members, and we have always welcomed our regional council reps as voting members, so I will make sure I add that back into the draft right now. Thank you for catching that.
Thank you very much.
Of course. That's why we do this.
Is there one member from each REMSCO, or how does that?
Yeah, there's one regional council rep per regional council.
And then there's at-large members as well that if I'm reading this correctly, I don't see at-large membership.
Were the at-large docs or non-docs, Todd?
The at-large are docs.
They were docs.
They're regional council.
Yeah.
Docs.
Yeah.
Do we, I guess, my only question, so,
I think
do we need them with the expansion of this, is my only question.
I guess my question is, do we have any docs that are not also EMS medical directors and would thus be given a seat anyway? Is anybody aware of
Good
what?
question.
Dr. Walters is, Dr. Farney is, I am, Dr. Teuscher is, Dr. Santillo. Okay. Well,
Santillo used to be sisters, but he's not anymore.
oh, okay, so maybe that at-large is vacant. We'll follow that up. Okay, great.
Mike Mangione is the current acting director at Sisters.
Ah, okay.
So Mike's there, and Ken Moore is the director in both spots.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. All right, so we will reconsider that. Let's see. Okay, so chair, vice chair. Right, so the proposal that I received was, they didn't really say where in here, but under Article 5 somewhere, whether it's a new section or otherwise, maybe in Section 1, to propose that the vice chair and the chair both be board certified or at least board eligible in emergency medicine and or EMS. And since that wasn't in the draft, I'm sharing it with you now. No other changes
Dr.
here.
O'Brien?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just, I think our current, and I forget what policy number it is, but I can find it, on requirements of agency medical directors and that for the REMAC, I think we put pediatric emergency medicine board certified in there as well, so maybe you want to include that,
Yep,
just a
that would be
suggestion.
fine. PZM, EM, EMS.
Why is it not, so I think one of the things this, changes are doing is being much more inclusive and adding a lot more people, which is fantastic, with the correction that Mickey pointed out. For the chair position though, I'm not sure why we're not saying board certified in EMS. A regional cardiology oversight group would want board certification in cardiology, not just internal medicine. Would welcome the voice of internal medicine docs. I think we should welcome the voice of all medical directors, but I think our chair should be board certified in the specialty that is here.
And I would nominate Dr. Clemency for chair-elect of the REMAC. I think that's the only thing, Brian, I said joking, but I think the only thing that we have to be just aware of is that we seem to sometimes struggle with who wants to be the vice chair or the next chairman of the REMAC, and that would decrease our pool a little bit. I don't disagree with the intent and what you're saying, but we do have REMAC members that attend that are not board certified in EMS, and so do we want to go to that point or not? I'm not opposed to it, I'm just raising the discussion,
I'm not opposed to it either. All right, I'm gonna put it in the draft, hearing no objections. The meeting frequency under Article 6, the proposal, we currently meet 6 times a year. They have been mercifully very short, almost silly short sometimes. So the proposal is to decrease that to 4 times a year, so quarterly meeting in person as required with our open meetings law. But, you know, that would also require sort of an increase in interim approvals, because I'm not gonna hold somebody up for 4 months because we just met and then they submitted their forms. I don't personally see a major problem with interim approvals. They're fairly routine business of the WREMAC. If there were a big concern or perhaps a higher risk issue or some dramatically new or, you know, departure from what we typically approve, you know, a special meeting can be called for that purpose if we have to. But that was a proposal. I'm not necessarily opposed to going to, I'm not opposed to going to 4, but I'm also not necessarily opposed to staying at 6. Any thoughts? All right, well, the draft says 4, I guess we'll go with 4. That's the minimum, right. Section 2, 5 voting members in 2 regions. That's still what a quorum has been defined as. That's really because I didn't sit down and find out what the numbers of how many medical directors there are. I also didn't want to increase the requirement of a quorum since, you know, most of the medical directors in the region are busy and don't attend the meetings. So I would hate to consistently not have a quorum because we set the number too high. Let's see, meeting minutes are maintained, no changes there. Special meetings can be called by the chair. 72 hours notice will be provided, and that has not changed except under exceptional circumstances, which we did do a couple times in the early phases of COVID. And if a special meeting is called, only business for which the meeting is called can be conducted. That's also not changed. Standing, was that a comment, question? Article 7, subcommittees, there were no major changes here. Standing subcommittees can be recommended by any voting member subject to 2/3 approval by those members present. The subcommittee chair and its members need not be physicians or voting members of the WREMAC and are appointed officially by the WREMAC chair. 2/3 vote with chair approval is required to dissolve a standing committee. Ad hoc committees formed at the chair's discretion, no vote required, and subcommittees are also dissolved at the conclusion of their task. All right, Code of Ethics did not have any edits, but if anybody found something that they think we should or need to update, please let me know. This is just about, manage your conflicts. Nobody else here officially speaks on behalf of the WREMAC, so I really leave it to the providers and the members and the agency medical directors and the voting members to manage conflicts if they see any arise. Article 9, conflicts of interest, also did not have any changes. Article 10, changes in rules of operation and governance. I did not. There were no proposed changes, nor did I see any sent to me. And then lastly, bylaw review. There was a change. The rules shall be reviewed by the WREMAC instead of every 2 years, every 3 years. I'm just trying, it's going to probably end up being more than every 2 years anyway, since it was 10 to get to today. But if we want to pick a different number, that's also fine. And that's it. That's the extent of the proposed changes. Any questions or concerns? Okay, so with the replacement, the replacement of the EMS fellows and the regional council reps, as we discussed, any concerns or objections, or is there a motion to vote on the bylaws? Or do we need to table it?
I think we should let it age like a fine wine.
Sounds good.
Next meeting.
No rush. All right. Any objection to tabling it? Perfect.
That would also let us like put those in and recirculate them with the additions and changes.
Sounds good.
Do we have any idea how many members that would actually give us then?
No, we can find out. We can make that part of the report for next time.
Do we currently, Karen, automatically, like, do all medical directors in the region automatically get, like, invites to the meeting and minutes and stuff like that right now?
All the medical directors? No.
Okay, we'll have to work towards that.
All right, thank you.
All right. Any other old business that we didn't notice? Okay, moving forward to new business, before we get into the various approvals, of which there are many. Excuse me, 2 items were brought to my attention. Number 1, I hope will be fast, but who knows. Revisiting WREMAC policy 1998-5, so blast from the past. That policy is very short, and it essentially reads that hospitals shall have UHF or VHF radios to go along with the telephone systems they have. I can promise you that most hospitals do not have that now. We used to have it at ECMC and we don't have it anymore. So it seems like this policy is moot. And I would entertain a motion to either dramatically revise it, although I'm not sure to what, or just retire it.
Just saying, that's something Chafee had that you guys don't have. Throw it out there.
Nice! I was hoping you were gonna say something like that.
Well played, sir, well played.
Well done. And I was about to say, this doesn't stop a hospital from having a VHF or UHF radio.
I mean, come on, you had to expect something.
I tip my hat to you, Doctor.
No,
Well done. Well done.
Well played.
Radio should be taken out off right there.
Well played.
It's, actually, the state requires ambulance service to still have, 340, 155.340. That's the state EMS frequency.
And all we're saying is we're not gonna require that the hospitals have 155.340. Which, you know, sort of begs the question why the ambulances do, but that's a separate question.
But it looks like Ed Major's on the case.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, 30, yes.
He's laughing as hard as we are.
It's Article 30, Section 3030 clearly describes what you need, so check that out, no problem. I'll get that to you if you'd like.
You're a good man, sir. You're a good man.
So is there a motion to retire policy 1998-5?
I'll make a motion.
Is there anything else in that policy?
No.
That's literally what it says.
It literally just says that. It says,
Oh, boy.
I will read it for the benefit of the membership.
It won't take long.
All hospitals that provide online medical command shall have VHF, UHF radio capabilities to communicate with pre-hospital personnel separate and distinct from cellular phones. That is all. We have a motion from Dr. Walters to retire the policy. Is there a second? We really like our radios.
Yeah. This is Josette. We'll second that.
Thank you, Dr. Teuscher. Any opposition to retiring this very important policy?
And if there's state guidance, it'll supersede it anyway, so.
Right. Hearing none, I'm gonna say the motion passed. All right, 1998-5 is retired. Second order of new business before the mass approvals. Policy 2002-1, which relates to giving report during a transfer of care at a receiving facility. So the language in question is the second to last paragraph, which I will read to you. This is about, this is the policy that allows providers to get, tells you need to give a verbal report, but under exceptional boarding circumstances, if you cannot drop your patient off within 30 minutes, and there is a safe place to leave them, whether that is a chair or a cot, that you may do that. However, there has been a restriction towards the end that says the pre-hospital care provider may place the patient on the facility's chair/cart, leave a written report, and return to service. That's not contested. Patients on mental health, 941, 945, 957 status, may not be left at and unattended. That's what it says. It probably meant may not be left unattended. The proposal is to strike that language because the patient is physically inside the facility and is the responsibility of the facility, and that if the facility is unable to assume care for that patient, that it should not result in the EMS crew being held there. I would open it up to discussion.
I would think, Dr. O'Brien, the other thing is if they're on 941, 945 papers or something, then they're also the responsibility of whoever put them on that papers, police or community. So, right.
Agreed.
So that's not on EMS, that's on whoever is committing them.
Agreed.
Was this policy circulated ahead of this meeting?
It was not. This was a late edition. So we don't have to make a decision.
I fundamentally agree with everything you guys are saying, but I would support also making sure that all our hospitals are on notice so they can provide feedback before that goes into effect.
I think that's prudent. I think that is very prudent.
So, and I think the reason this is coming up, right, is because of some of the delays we're seeing at some of the hospitals. So perhaps if we disseminate this to hospitals, then some explanation as to why it's coming around and how it is unacceptable to hold EMS crews for extended periods of time, i.e. 2 hours.
Yep.
Maybe should be included in that memo that goes out or email that goes out.
I wanted to say that this is not meant to impugn any one or multiple hospitals. Everybody is struggling with patient flow. Everybody is struggling with boarding and resources and staffing. And on behalf of the REMAC, like, I want to thank every facility and every person and every agency that is doing whatever they can do to get creative to maintain, you know, patient care standards, but at the same time maintain availability so that way the 911 system continues to function. So, you know, for everyone working and pulling their hair out and getting calls in the middle of the night about ambulances being held or whatnot, and is trying to work towards that problem, thank you very much. This is just another way to try, because this, you know, let's face it, we're talking about two particular hospitals in this case. I work at one of them, and, you know, in the case of the mental health, of the behavioral health holds, it's not even the ED that's holding us up, right? It's about where we can get those, when we can get those patients to the unit they need to be evaluated in, and that's a flow problem that the ED doesn't control. So we're very sensitive and aware of our role in the boarding issue in terms of behavioral health holds. And I can't speak on behalf of ECMC, but I can speak as an ED provider at ECMC that, you know, all of the docs there are willing to try to do what we can to support, you know, getting crews turned around and back in service as quickly as we can. So, any further discussion on this? There's not going to be a vote today, but any objections or strong feelings on removing that language? Okay, so we'll let this percolate, and then we will try to, you know, develop some wording to communicate to hospitals, you know, the impending change or the anticipated impending change, and the reasoning for it, like Dr. Walters suggested. We can maybe pull the trigger on that at the May meeting. All right, we will table that. Moving forward to our last item under new business, which is our current approvals and notifications of intent. We have quite a few, which is wonderful to see. Gowanda acquisition and transmission of BLS 12 lead EKG. Medical director changes, and they are numerous. West Seneca Fire number 3 from Dr. Billatier to Dr. Mangione. Harris Hill Fire from Dr. Lynch to Dr. Mangione. Angola Fire from Dr. Billatier to Dr. Tanaka. West Seneca Fire number 2 from Dr. Billatier to Dr. Peretta. Pine Hill Hose from Dr. Tackett to Dr. Peretta. Doyle from Dr. Tackett to Dr. Peretta. Evans Evans Center Volunteer Fire from Dr. Billatier to Dr. Tanaka. And Boston EMS from Dr. Billatier to Dr. Innes. Level of care changes. West Seneca Reserve number 3, to Advanced EMT to EMT. Colden Fire from Advanced EMT to EMT. Amity Rescue from EMT to Advanced EMT. Brockton Fire from Paramedic to EMT. Falconer Volunteer from EMT to Paramedic. And Portland Ambulance from Paramedic to EMT. Syringe epinephrine notice, Woodlawn Fire, CPAP approval for Boston EMS and Lakeview Fire. And then additional BLS 12 leads, in addition to Gowanda, for Lakeview Fire, Boston Emergency Squad, Lakeshore Volunteer, and the City of Tonawanda Fire Department. Those are all listed in the agenda. I read them aloud for everybody, I guess, just because I like to hear myself talk, and I would love to entertain a motion to approve those en masse.
So moved, Cosgrove.
Cosgrove motion.
Second, Wenner.
Thank you, Dr. Wenner. Motion seconded. Any opposition? All right, carries by unanimous consent. So those are all approved. Any other new business before the REMAC?
Dr. O'Brien, I'll just, to go back to the PALS discussion that we had before.
Yes.
It is in the hospital, the 405 regulations there, so I will add it back and add PALS in the policy website.
Okay, thank you for following that up. Anything else?
Does it need to be though? Because it's redundant, it already has to be there. Do we need to?
It would supersede it anyway.
That's where that wording came from, but I don't know.
I'm just saying, do we need those things if they, I don't need to make those meeting anymore, but if we're trying to streamline it, they have to have it anyway, do we need that language? I guess we can work that out next month.
Yeah, we can figure it out next month.
Quick question. Pre-pandemic, we had talked about having an online base station course.
Yes.
And obviously it died with the pandemic. Or is there a chance of bringing that back rather than the once a year in July?
I was recording some of it yesterday.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, cool.
Yeah. So the question was, pre-pandemic, there was a lot of excitement and plans for an online base station course. The whole idea is to you know, make it more accessible, make it easier, so we don't have to just have it once or twice a year, or ad hoc courses here and there, and the answer to that is, oh, and the question was, are we gonna get back to that? The answer to that is yes. I was recording some of it the other day. I will try to finish that up sooner than I finish the thing that Rob asked me to record 2 years ago that I just finished 3 months ago. But I will finish this, and then we'll do some dry runs, and then we'll figure out where to host it, and then we'll announce it, I hope, maybe before the summer recess. Yep. Anything else? All right, then if there's a motion to adjourn.
Josette, so moved.
All right, I don't do a lot of motioning, so I'll second that. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you in May.